You are live.
Okay, this is the Senate Education Committee, April 3rd, 2025, 2:30. I apologize to all our witnesses, but the floor ran a bit later than we expected. And so we're a little behind schedule, but that's okay, at least on our end. And so this afternoon, we're taking up adult education and literacy updates. And when this got scheduled, the agency asked, we hadn't actually had the court to us, so we had invited the agency asked to be included, and of course we said yes. And then as it turns out, the secretary is here, having been here for an hour and have to be somewhere else pretty soon.
Yeah.
So we decided to go a little bit out of order and get the secretary on first. And because a lot of you in this room are new to this committee, we'll go around quickly, introduce ourselves, and we always do this. So over there in that chair is Senator Keisha Hinsdale from Chittenden. Here is Senator Nader Hashim from Windham. And I suspect that we'll begin shortly. And
in person, Senator Dave Weeks, Rutland County.
Congress, Bennington County.
Terry Williams, Rutland County.
Steve Heffernan, Addison County.
And then for the record.
Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Zoe Saunders, Secretary of Education. I'm also joined by Robin Castle, who will be sharing more details about the program. She's our State Director of Adult Education and Literacy, and also Lisa Helm, our Assistant Division Director of Student Pathways. We thought it was important to come today to really ground you in an understanding of the process as we make the competitive grant awards for the Adult Education Literacy Program, and also to give you an understanding of the current context. So I know that a lot of this information is new to you, I think to this committee, at least for this year. And so Robin will expand and really providing an overview of what the program is and how the program is funded. Because I have to leave, I'll just share a couple key points that I know Robin will reinforce. I think a couple key things to understand about the program is it is a competitive grant program. Also, the General Assembly recognized the need to modernize the funding formula for the program and made statutory changes, which the Agency of Education has implemented. Those changes move us away from the former formula, which was based on county characteristics, and funding instead the number of students served within the county. We are always mindful of a fiscal cliff being created when there are changes to funding. And for that reason, for the last year, we honored the prior funding formula so that there was that consistency with the prior grant award. We are now in a position where we have an open grant competition, which would award providers for the next 3 years. And that is based on the new funding formula that has been put into statute. So the Agency of Education's role is to implement what is in law. The General Assembly defined the adjustment to that funding formula, which we have complied with. The language in the House is looking to amend and really revert back to the former funding. I just want everyone to be aware of the fact that we have an open grant competition, and US Ed has advised us against stopping that competition in the absence of state law. And so, of course, we have to implement state law, and we also have to ensure that we can have continuity of services. The grant competition closes April 25th with the expectation of awards being made in the middle of May. And we have received interest from other providers that historically have not participated. And so a couple things to clarify as you think about the overall funding. The overall funding for this program statewide has remained very stable. The adjustments are based on the students served. And so what you can see within the testimony that we provided is that there has been a discrepancy in terms of the amount of funding for counties based on needs. So you would have a county that served a significantly fewer number of students receiving the same funding as a county that served many more students. And so the intent of the General Assembly was to be more equitable with that funding. We do recognize that makes a shift. Again, we want to avoid a fiscal cliff, which is why last year we continued with the old formula with the understanding that the new grant competition would be aligned to those statutory changes. A couple other points just to make note of is that should we I think what we're trying to understand and what we recommend is moving forward with the current grant competition because it is currently open and allowing that process to be followed. So that's kind of where we are, and we wanted to address some of those. Really, we're kind of in a challenging and awkward position and thinking about changing a program that is currently open, and the agency's role is to implement the law. General Assembly amended in statute the requirements for how we fund, and we have guidance from USAID to continue with that, and it is our responsibility to ensure that continuity of operation. So just wanted to be explicit about where we are in the process, and I think just some of the inherent challenges and complexities with the recommendations that are coming before you for this current cycle.
So can you go back to the basics about this again?
Yes.
The law was changed. The House is now looking for it to go back the other direction. Do I understand that right?
Yeah.
And tell us again what the implications are of each.
Yep. And I think I'll invite Robin, if you could join me at that table, if you want to remember your chair, and I will need to leave at 2:50, but I thought the best thing was for Robin to really give you a bigger understanding. So I wanted to just kind of give a heads up as to some of the challenges that are just real and present in terms of the current situation. But I think it's important for us to step back and just understand the program overall and the evolution of the program. So if you could respond and just give some overview.
Sure. Thank you. Robin Castle. I'm the State Director of Adult Education and Literacy with the Agency of Education. So a little background about the Adult Education and Literacy program. We provide academic services and basic skills instruction to help students who are 16 and older and not enrolled in school to transition successfully to college and career. And so under the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, we are Title II, we're authorized there as a program. We are a workforce development program. We have both federal and state funding that supports the program all those funds are included in the competition that we're required under WIOA, we fondly call it, or WIOA, to compete the grants for multi-years. So it's rather multi-year grants rather than 1 year at a time. So currently we are competing the grants for a 3-year grant period. Previously, the period that is ending on June 30th is the end of a 2-year grant period. So what, I'm sorry, did you want me to?
I think
just this question?
Again, just timeline. So when
Sure.
this was transitioned to being a competitive program, and then just a reflection on the General Assembly's attempt to modernize the rules and where we are in the process.
Of course. Sorry about that. So yes, in 2017 was the first year that we were required to compete the grants. And it's been competitive. We are for competition since 2017. The funding changes that were in section 4011 under education payments in 16 VSA specifies that the appropriation would be 26% of the base education amount times the 2-year average of students served in previous 2 years. And so that's how the appropriation is calculated. And so it's emphasizing number of students served. Previously, the state Board of Education funding formula that we were following is emphasizing the demographics of the counties. So it's rather a complicated formula that was including things like the percentage of residents in each county who did not have a diploma, things like that. So that changed under section 4011, the way, and you can see there is a chart that shows the difference in how that money is allocated out to counties, starting in FY 26, following that law.
Find that.
So I think what you'll hear today is broad agreement that the funding formula needed to be modernized. When that was transitioned into focusing on students, you will see that there are two counties that are impacted in terms of the distribution, which is largely Essex and Grand Isle. And that's due to the fact that they're serving fewer students. Other counties are now seeing an increase in funding because they're serving more students. So this is all about the service delivery to students. So some of the, I think, concern that has been expressed by prior grant awardees is a loss of funding. And I think a key thing to communicate here is these funds are not entitlement funds. These funds are competitive grant funds that are done on a multi-year cycle. And the agency's funding estimates are based on changes in statute by the General Assembly in terms of how we fund, and providers are eligible to apply to deliver services in multiple counties. But this is around providing services to students. So just want to make sure that there's clarity and that the formula did not, the formula as established and as was revised in statute did not contemplate weights. It was a very straightforward formula that really superseded the prior state board rules, and we were required to implement that within the grant and competition. And now we're nearing the end of that grant competition.
Just out of curiosity, I'm looking at Essex and Grand Isle, and I mean, those look like really dramatic drops compared to the somewhat minor fluctuations in the other county. Are those two counties, are those just examples of them using access to grants, or something else happened?
Yeah, so I think, and if Robin, if you can walk through, so because of the prior funding formula, it was really looking more at community characteristics as opposed to students served. And so there was a desire that was, I think, shared by both providers and the General Assembly to modernize those rules so that it was more equitable. The result of that is that because it's funded by students, those counties that historically had received additional funding, but were not serving as many students, are now receiving less funding based on the students that they're serving.
Thank you.
And Robin, if you want to expand on that, is that anything else you want to add?
Yes, no, I think that's perfect. You can see on the chart that Essex County had around 9 students served over a 2-year period. Grand Isle County also had 9 compared to the other counties that literally had hundreds of students. So that's based on the residency of the student.
So just, as comparison, so in the former formula, Essex is serving 9 students. They would be receiving close to 37,000, and a county that was serving 100 would be receiving less. It would be receiving 30,000 to 50,000. So I think there's clarity just looking at the numbers that there was absolutely a need to modernize the funding formula. And we have now implemented that, and you can see what that translates to. I also want to express that we share a commitment to expanding outreach in those communities that are rural. But we also need to make sure that as a state, we're appropriately funding based on students. Sorry.
Where the data came from, where did they get that from? You said it was students that are non-graduates, or I wanted to stop you when you were talking at that point, but I forgot how they came up with the data of how many students in each county.
2-year average.
Sure.
And yeah, how is that data collected that they can say, okay, there was X amount of people that
Right.
if you graduate or.
Yes, we have a statewide database where we collect information about the students that we're serving. So this data on this chart is showing you that these are the average number of students that we serve who lived in those counties over a 2-year period average. of
That
2
came into the
years.
program? Or
That were served by the adult education and literacy providers, sorry, yeah.
Thinking about enrollment is it, right, what you said,
Enrollment, yeah.
is the enrollment
all right.
for those counties for adults.
Senator.
I answered my own question. Okay. Okay.
So how often the data is every 2 years? Okay. Would it be easier if the AOE had the authority to just transfer that funding? Is that possible?
So I'm going to make sure I'm understanding your question, to transfer the funding within a grant period or, so there are rules governing a competitive process. And so I think that's what we're trying to communicate. The AOE is following state statute, and we're also following the guidelines of the competitive process. Within a competitive grant process, we cannot advantage any one provider, right? And so it's just anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I think if I understand, maybe part of your question is about if the amount of money is set for the region that any awarded provider receives. And then they propose a budget around how they will use that funding, and we approve that budget. They can make some amendments within the fiscal year to how they need to spend that money.
I'm just looking at if money is spent in that time period, if it's lost. Right, it didn't go where it needed to go at the right time.
But true, the money needs to be spent within the fiscal year.
Any other questions? So, actually,
Oh.
go ahead. Is that a question?
Oh,
Just point out, you left the final page that regarding the language on a committee to.
So, you know, as we've noted there is a difference in funding by county, right? Because it's based on students. And I think there have been providers that we heard from today who are concerned about that change and the impact in those counties. And there is language within the House bill to involve have the Agency of Education and providers really review the funding formula and make recommendations for a next session. And so we just want to make sure that there's a broader group of stakeholders involved in that. Again, with it being a competitive process, we can't advantage one group over another and making recommendations around funding, and that would need to follow the formal, rulemaking procedures.
Right. And that's the section under in H 493, section E 504.3.
Yes.
Can you expand on, so I'm not familiar with H 493, is that currently in the House, coming out of the House, House crossover?
It's coming out of the House and the budget.
Coming out as part of the budget.
Yeah.
Okay.
And when we were called to the House Commerce Committee the day that the new legislative language was introduced. And that had an opportunity at that time to coordinate with our legal counsel. So we're not able to provide, the additional guidance that we're sharing with you today, nor had we had a chance to consult with U.S. Department of Education at that time, kind of the procedures moving forward. And I think a couple of key things too, is we really think that I think the really important piece of this is a competitive grant award. This is not entitlement. That those dollars are committed to a contract with specific providers. And so I think it's important to note that it does not mean a lack of services to students who reside in the area. The grant requirements, students with the provider would be required to provide those services to the students in the county. I think wants to around profit grant.
Who are the providers? I know we're going to get into how does this program actually work?
Yeah, so Robin, if you could share just historically, who the providers have been and also through this new grant period, any additional.
And even while you're at it, who the students are.
Yeah.
And again,
Okay, sure.
yeah, takes it back to the beginning for a minute.
Maybe you talk about the repeal of that.
Yeah, I think it. So currently we have 4 providers in the state of Vermont. Some of them are here today to testify. They are nonprofit organizations. There are many other organizations that are eligible to apply for the grants. Almost any entity, basically, including a consortium, is eligible under federal law to apply for the grants. But currently we have 4 nonprofits, and they are each responsible for the counties that they provide services to. What was the second part of that question? So
Well, actually, who are the students?
so for the students,
Adult age group.
absolutely. So they have to be at least 16 years old in order to be in our program. They have to be unenrolled from school, unenrolled from home study and post-secondary institutions. We really serve a very diverse group of people in our program. And I think the providers today will be describing some of those specifics about different students, but it can be anywhere from the age of 16 to 99. We're serving about 33% of our students are English language learners. So they are eligible for our services regardless of other skills, just by virtue of being an English language learner. Most people seeking our services are looking for a diploma, around 2/3 of them, a diploma or a GED, but we'll also serve students who may already have a diploma or an advanced degree, but are seeking some kind of upskilling. Because we are a workforce development program, we help them access career pathways. We help them access job training. So it's a very diverse group of people. We had the repeal of the high school completion program last year, means that this year we've launched a pilot for the adult diploma program, which is Vermont is great in that way. Not every state provides a way for adults who are unenrolled from school to access a diploma. So we're really proud of the fact that we have that program here in the state of Vermont. And that's in this pilot phase.
So you share what was involved in developing that pilot, if it's new graduation requirements, just so that they have an understanding.
Yeah, so we pulled together a diverse group of stakeholders to help us build and design the pilot program. So we talked to principals and involved the Vermont Principals Association, for example, and current providers and high schools. High schools can opt into the program, meaning they're not required to participate in the program, but students do get a diploma from their local high school who's participating in the program. They are as I say, if they are not opting into the program, the student can still access a diploma through another high school. We developed statewide proficiency-based graduation requirements for this program so that we designed the program for adults. So we're not recreating the traditional high school experience. We're really aligning what we're doing with the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act's intent around serving adult learners to help them transition to college and career, and recognizing their unique needs in developing those workforce skills. So I say that it's in a pilot phase now. This afternoon, we're having our first advisory group meetings. We put together an advisory group who's going to be advising us on how to continue the design of the program and development.
I think it's important to note, just in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of focus on really modernizing this program. And so you're seeing that first within some of the new graduation requirements and programmatic
enhancements, and then today we're largely talking about the funding. Does it be the first year that that funding formula is the first year that formula implemented?
So if you have a master's in something, you can come to this adult education and get a different, start or work on a different degree, from what I'm understanding.
Not that we would offer them, be able to offer them a degree, but if
But to
if
start
they
down a path.
are looking, let's say they're assessing with skills in English and math that are below the high school level, we could help them develop those skills. So if we don't see a lot of people coming to us with master's degrees unless they're English language learners and seeking the English language instruction and access to employment in demand industries in the areas. That's language straight from the WIOA state plan that we are to be working on in the in-demand industries to really help prepare people to enter those industries. So we would be helping them, for example, if I wanted to get a promotion, but my skills in math were really holding me back, I could go to my adult education and literacy provider and ask for some help with my math to help me get that promotion.
And if, did they give you a test per se when you start, just to see where you're at? And then if you score well enough, it's like, sorry, we can't, you're above the average of what it takes to come in. Is that kind of what happens?
Well, we wouldn't turn them away as much as we would help them find what it is they really need. If the federally approved assessments that we use were showing that they actually did have those skills, we would help them understand that and talk to them about what are their goals and see if it's appropriate to make referrals out to the Department of Labor or Higher Ability or some other organization that can help them meet their goals.
Thank you.
So is it true that one of the issues that we may be hearing about next is the funding going up and down creates instability, ability of the providers to maintain staff or have a consistency? If you then you rock it up for 2 years, then you crash, then is that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can note here that there are counties that have adjusted funding levels. With any competitive grant, there's no guarantee you would get those funds in the next grant period. There is an opportunity for providers to serve multiple counties, and the overall funding is relatively stable.
That level, okay. That
Yeah.
level, okay. And the competitive grants came about because of legislation in 2017. Is that
Federal requirement.
federal requirements? Okay.
Right, that's the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act was signed into law in 2014.
Any other questions? Yes.
So I understand the change, but in fiscal year 27, how will you administer determining funding levels? You know, you had a 2-year average that I thought in the past. What will you do in the future? What's buried in the legislation?
And this is defined in state statute, so we follow that. Robin, you can clarify how that works, and then also the estimates too, should there be adjustments.
Yeah, so we will continue to follow the law. Let's say there was no change. So the previous 2-year, the average of the 2 years would change every year necessarily, right?
Sure.
So right now we're using the average of those students served in fiscal year 23 and 24. That will change once we have finished our FY 25 year and had time to clean up that data and finalize how many students were served who had valid assessments, which is in the law, who would count into that. So then the 2-year average will be for fiscal year 24 and 25. It's 26% of whatever the base education amount is for that fiscal year
Right.
times that 2-year average. So that's how it shifts by the year.
And I think what we're talking about is we're closing out one grant period and are in open competition for a new grant period. But within that grant period, can you describe that? Because it's a multi-year grant.
Yes, so the awarded providers wouldn't have to apply for the grant every year. That within that grant period, we would determine through the calculations under law, how much money each provider will get. And then for each fiscal year, they propose a budget, which we review and approve. And then they receive the award once the big bill passes and the federal government tells us how much money is available for the year. That's a lot of.
But you also, you distribute the federal money as well as the state money then?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thanks for letting us go first.
Thank you.
We can do this in whatever order you want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lisa Hellman, Bobby Kessel. Is that?
Oh, no, that was.
Yeah, yes.
Did you want to go
So-
for? Nothing more.
My pages. So we'll go for pages. However you want to do this. Any of the three, yeah.
Um,
For the record.
For the record, my name is Catherine Kalkstein. I'm the Executive Director of Central Vermont Adult Education, and I live in the town of Kingston.
I'm Michelle Post. I'm the Executive Director of Northeast Kingdom Learning Services, and I live in Irishburg.
So we do have a PowerPoint that we have pulled together that will tell you about our services and who we are, what we do, who we serve. But in responding to what we kind of heard earlier, I sort of wanted to leapfrog into some of the questions that you had.
Do the basics first.
Okay.
Which you do it the way you're going to, and then get to that.
Okay.
More helpful for us.
Okay, great. So adult education and literacy services help people build the assets that they need to move out of poverty, to the level of confidence to move toward success throughout their lives. So I don't know if the slideshow is going to be up there on the
So do you need
screen behind me or.
I think everybody's got it in front of them.
Oh, so I'll have to.
We'll just post it so that people.
Yeah.
We'll see it. Okay, great. So we meet with students and we help them identify their concrete learning goals that they have. And then we help them break them down into steps that are achievable for them. So our students can set goals in many different domains. It can be for family and life. Maybe they want to get better at reading so they can read to their children. Maybe they have academic goals where they want to get a GED or a high school completion, or they have career and college readiness goals. Maybe they want to get an industry recognized credential, or they want to go on to one of our Vermont colleges. Our services include literacy education, so reading, writing, math, including computer and financial literacy education. As you heard earlier, we do English language learning, U.S. citizenship preparation. We do high school diploma program, which is now called the adult diploma program, and we do GED credentialing. And we also do career and college readiness services.
So, adult edu, as providers, we offer a broad range of services. We offer services that are really unique and specific to the individual student. So a student will come in and we will do the test of adult basic education to see where their skill levels are in reading, writing, and math. And then through motivational interviewing and through other conversations, we learn about what are their hopes and dreams, like what are their goals, what do they want for themselves. And through a series of interactions with the student, we develop their learning plan. So what are their goals? What are they wanting to do with us as providers? Is their goal to earn a high school diploma? Is their goal to earn a GED? Is their goal to learn English? Is their goal to move into be college ready? Are they looking to just enter a career, like an entry level field? Do they want to be able to take a CTE course and move into technical training? So everything we do is really tailored and relevant to that individual student's goals and needs. We also help facilitate regional workforce expansion. As one of our mandated requirements in our grants is an integrated employment training program, education training program. And what that does is we work with students simultaneously in adult basic education and skill building, as well as the technical field and having a work experience. And it all happens simultaneously so that they're learning as they go. They're building their skills, their soft skills, they're building their technical skills and whatever the field is, they're getting to experience it. And all of that helps them to make that better decision of, is this really the field for me? We work closely with our tech centers because a lot of times the work we do feeds into their programs. What we do with students is we help them to be prepared and ready to enter a CTE training or a workforce training and be successful in it because they're coming in with the basic skills that they need. For example, in our region, anybody that is signing up for LNA or an MNA course through the Career Center comes to us first to do the test of adult basic education. Because in order for them to be successful in those pieces, the tech centers have already identified they need to be at an NRS 4 or an NRS 5, which is the national rating scale for determining what grade level is somebody in reading, writing, and math. And so the important role of the adult ed and literacy in the big picture tech is we are the feeder, we are the preparer, we are that pre-training trainer to really help folks be able to take advantage of the programs. And it's really about leveraging the dollars, right? So like by doing the work that we're doing and front loading it with these students before they enroll in a tech trainer or a college class, we're giving them the skills so that they're not getting in and dropping out partway through, or getting in and not being successful to complete it because their reading level or their math level was not really where it needed to be successful in that. Or maybe they just didn't have the soft skills they needed to understand and to be able to do it and persevere and to have the grit and to be able to handle all the things we have to handle, right? Like life is not perfect. Sometimes you get a flat tire. Getting a flat tire doesn't mean that you go back to bed that day and you don't call your boss or you don't call school and tell them that you can't come in. So it's so much more than just adult basic education that we provide these students.
Yeah, so you had asked earlier who our students are. And I will say that, they are Vermonters, they've been here, many of them for a long time, except for those who are here that are new Americans that are working with us. And for one reason or another, they did not get the skills that they needed, or the education that they needed, and they come to us. Many of them do have disabilities that we have to work with. So it's a fairly challenging population to work with. But it's so rewarding to see them when they are successful. And as Michelle mentioned, they come to us with many, many different skills in mind for themselves or goals that they have. And the plan that we have with them is very individualized. So it really is working with them together in lockstep to help them achieve the goals that they have identified for themselves. And that goal could change, like you mentioned, the flat tire, so suddenly you may have a goal, to do one thing, and then something happens in your life and you realize, okay, now I need to kind of change my learning plan because I have this immediate need in front of me and I've got to figure that out. But so on this other slide, you can see the student numbers that we served. The last two completed fiscal years, FY23 and 24, we served about 2,000 students statewide. And the common outcomes is things that we've already talked about, earning a high school diploma, GED. And so each year, we employ the four organizations, nonprofits that do these services. We employ about 132 educators and support staff to provide these educational career readiness services to about 2,000 students from every city and town in the state. So we have a wide range. And over the last 5 years, the average cost per student was about $3,000. So it's
Roughly how many hours is that of teaching?
it kind of depends on the student again and upon their learning plan. You know, and as Michelle mentioned, you know, some of them, you know, it's difficult. I mean, I know at least at my organization, we see it, they'll come and they'll be with us for a couple of months and then they kind of disappear off the radar screen. And then 9 months later, they'll come back and pick up where they started. So it's kind of hard to put it neatly in a box. Like, you know, when you think of your typical high school student and you're like, oh, okay, they're in that chair these many hours. It's a little bit different because, you know, adult learners, their lives are very complicated. They've got families, they've got multiple jobs, they've got transportation challenges and childcare challenges and medical bills and things that just kind of, you know, get in their way. Life, exactly.
One other question, maybe Mr. English, a lot of farms or farm workers. Is that where that?
It kind of depends on the region. I mean,
Yeah.
we definitely have a lot of farm workers. We've also had a lot of folks, at least in our region, Cabot Creamery brings some folks over on a limited visa. Don't ask me which one. I can't remember if it's 2B. And they're here for a number of months. And, you know, they just sort of show up at our learning center because they want to learn English. So they come and seek us out, which is great. So last year, one of the reasons that we're here in front of you and talking to you about this confusing issue about the funding and all the stuff that's going on is that last year we spent a lot of time here working with the Agency of Ed. We did, you should have a copy of this, the Adult Education and Literacy Student Access Committee report. We had worked on how can we sunset the high school completion program, which is a fee-for-service program, and revitalize and revamp this adult deployment program. And the transition to that has resulted in some unintended consequences that we're now in front of you to talk about. And I think one of the hard pieces is, you know, you've got legislative folks in different branches. You've got the Legislative Council of the Agency of Education. You've got the Legislative Council here in your own building. And as often can happen, no offense to any lawyers, but there can be different interpretations of how things play out. And so I feel like that's one of the challenges that we have here now. So in the study committee report, there were two pieces that the study committee recommended that needed to happen in order for adult education and literacy to get to a place where the funding was stable so we could plan for our budgets and our students and our staff and all of that. The big piece was that transition from high school completion to the adult diploma program. And that's in process. Hasn't been as smooth as we would have hoped, hasn't been quite as collaborative as we would have hoped as the providers who've been working with these students for decades. But, you know, the other piece that did not happen, the second recommendation was that we really modernize that funding formula, recognizing that a pure, you know, student served was going to, as you can see from the chart, was going to very disproportionately affect those counties that are very, very rural. And it's very hard to provide services as a nonprofit organization to provide services in a county where there's that small amount of funding being allocated. And so unfortunately, what has happened is that the first piece, you know, went forward. You know, we changed the way that money was appropriated to adult education organizations, which is something that we're fully on board with. And the second piece that's been more challenging is how those funds are then allocated to the providers. And this has nothing to do with feeling like we're entitled to these funds. I just feel like who knew would step up and say, oh, I would really love to provide services in Grand Isle County for $32,000. I don't know who could possibly provide services for that amount of money in that county. So, you know, this is just really about how can we get services for people in the entire state who are looking for adult education services, you know, who need to have access, fair and equal access to those services. And that was one of the big charges. And the reason why the study committee came together last year was to discuss fair and equitable access to adult education. And so, you know, we're really here because that second piece kind of hasn't played out in the way that we had thought that it would. And it's having some very, very negative consequences.
Yeah, so I guess full disclosure here, my organization, Northeast Kingdom Learning Services, covers Essex County, Caledonia County, and Orleans County. And for those three counties, the shift in the funding allocation model method has resulted in what would be a $500,000 cut to the funding that has been there to provide these services. So I want to give a little bit of context behind the numbers. So, it's been stated, and it's right there in black and white, that Essex County, received approximately 300,000 in FY24 and served only 9 students. While factually accurate, this statement is overly simplistic and reflects a misunderstanding of how Vermont's adult education and literacy system has operated for over 30 years. So here are some important clarifications. Historical funding structure. For the last 3 decades, AEL funding allocations have been based on a weighted formula by county. This structure has remained consistent and has not been adjusted since its inception in 1994. Which is why the AELN providers, prior to this report going out, back when your predecessor was at the helm, we talked about this. We talked about how the funding formula needed to be updated, that it overly weighted some of the counties, and the factors that were going into it needed to be looked at. There were like 70% of this and 30% of this and 15% of this. Well, with the demographics changing in the state, was that even relevant anymore? So we've been talking about this for a long time. The competitive application process, the process with which providers apply to serve specific counties has long been the competitive process. I mean, Robin Castle mentioned back 2014, 2017. So we've been through this before. We've applied before, and historically, Northeast Kingdom Learning Services has been awarded the funds to do the work in those 3 counties, because that's what we applied for. We've been providing services in those 3 counties for, I want to say, over 50 years. So there are 4 providers. The Tutorial Center serves 1 county, and KLS serves 3. Central Vermont Adult Ed serves 3, and Vermont Adult Learning serves the remaining 7 counties. So providers apply for and are awarded service regions. When grant agreements are written, each provider is given a target number of students to serve. This is a number that's mutually agreed on with the Agency of Education and the provider. The agreements also include performance measures that must be met. So county-specific targets, with the exception of the 1 provider who only serves 1 county, there is no specification in our grant how many students need to be served in each region. So for Northeast Kingdom Learning Services, that was awarded a grant to serve Essex, Orleans, and Caledonia County. We were targeted to serve 200 students. In FY24, we served 204. Only 9 of those students came to us from Essex County. If you've ever been to Essex County, if you've ever traveled from Island Pond to Norton to Canaan, you pass one pump gas station with a store. Industry in Canaan, Beecher Falls, has dropped drastically. There's not a lot of industry. It's sparsely populated. You pass a lot of vacation homes on the way. There's a lot of vacation and a lot of camps. But as far as the population, it's not like it's Newport, right? And so as part of what we have to do is we provide, like Robin said, we have to provide a budget annually to the Agency of Education. And in that budget, we identified how we are spending the funds that were allocated to our region. And the budget is a very, very complex budget, like where, everything is function code and object code and site. For many of us, we have multiple sites. The cost to serve students in regions that are more densely populated is a little less than what it costs to serve in a region that's not. So for instance, in Orleans County, we have one main learning center in Newport. And there's a body of money that supports that. I'm paying one rent. I'm paying one property insurance, general liability insurance. I'm staffing that one location. In Caledonia County, I have to have two locations. I have one in Hardwick to serve that side, and I have one in St. Johnsbury to serve that side, right? So you've got two buildings, two rents, two staffs. Everything's duplicated. And then in Essex County, we've got little centers in Island Pond and in Essex. And this is not unlike any other provider. Every other provider has little outposts here or there. They have satellite centers, they have their main centers, and they determine where those funds are best suited, right?
My apologies.
That's okay.
I wanted to back up one step based on what you just said about distribution of facilities. And this may involve the AOE. So I just want to make sure you're attuned to this. How come we're not utilizing the facilities and the staffs, the educators from the more traditional education system? So that the question of your facilities are not germane, that perhaps your staff could utilize facilities that were also during the day, they're middle school or what have you. Why is that even an issue?
Go ahead.
I mean, at least from our perspective, the students that we served, many of them did not have a good relationship with education, and they had a challenging time in the traditional education system. And so entering a traditional school again can be, I don't want to sound dramatic, but somewhat traumatizing. I think
That's the primary reason, like the sole reason for.
I don't know that would be the sole reason.
I guess I'm not
Historically-
understanding the question.
Yeah, I mean, we've been providing these services for 60 years.
We'll go back to, you said Caledonia County.
Yeah.
How many schools are in Caledonia County? How many of them could be used to conduct the program as opposed to your facilities, using your facilities?
So, well, St. J Academy isn't going to give us space, and Linden Institute isn't going. They're a lot of those places are already either their buildings are full or their buildings are in disrepair. So like they're even trying to find places or they're looking to relocate. We negotiate our rents really, really well. And
I'm sure of that.
and
But if rent's like not a factor, that dramatically decreases your costs.
20,000.
1,000 times 3 facilities, 4 facilities, whatever it was,
Mhm.
for your catchment. Well, I'm just wondering why that was.
Is it also the case, I think it's that partner shown right down in Bennington,
Mhm.
and one of it goes on during the day. It's not just night.
Our services are during the
During the
day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think,
Okay. All right.
And we do provide, I think, the piece, I guess, that would be why most is the population that we work with is a variety of ages. They are not just the 16, 17, 18. We also have the 35, 40, 45, 50-year-olds, right? And depending on where you are in the state, being able to have that place where they can go, they feel comfortable. It's a safe space. It feels good to them. It feels like they can engage in their learning. We have the tools and the staff necessary to really meet them uniquely. Working with an adult student is different than working with a K-12 student for a lot of reasons. The students that are coming to us are not the students that are excelling in school, that have grown up maybe in a family where education is important and what they're doing is important. So, I don't want to lose sight of what I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that the biggest challenge here is that, and it's kind of unfortunate, this report is dated January 2024. The agency was well aware of the disconnect and the need for the alignment of the rule and statute. And this report clearly says the second recommendation is revise State Board Rule Series 2400 to reflect recommend legislative changes aligned with state workforce governance and WIOA combined state plan and modernized formula for distributing funding equally. The 26% of the base education rate is not new. That's been in statute for a long time. There are many years that the agency didn't follow that and actually fund us that way, which was part of the problem. So it was really exciting that this finally came to a place where it was like front and center, like this is very clear. The way we're going to appropriate, because the intention was creating stability and predictability for funding for adult education and literacy, right? And so that did that. The intention through all of it was that that's how the state would appropriate to create that sense of stability, that sense of predictability and continuity. But that it also had to do this other piece of the work. It had to modernize that formula. What's unfortunate is that despite ample time, that the agency did not address this before they released the RFP. And that's unfortunate because now, you know, my organization, who has been doing this for work a long time and is not entitled to this, we are not entitled to this. But if you look at our performance measures, what we have done in those three counties is pretty remarkable. Our outcomes, our adult education and literacy has very, very high performance measures that we need to meet in order for a student to complete and graduate from our adult diploma program. They have to do the proficiencies that have already been identified. Before they had to be at our NRS score of 5, which is, you know, considered, you know, high school, higher high school level. So, you know, it was never like that intention. And the other thing that's really unfortunate is we as a network have been asking the agency what was going to happen when the RFP goes out, like what was funding for FY26 going to look like? And we were told the question was being taken to legal counsel. Okay. And we never received back any definitive answer. I mean, we've sent communications back as soon as December 11th. We sent a communication saying, these are our concerns, you know, about if the funding is going to happen this way. We haven't addressed this piece that the study committee said to address. But the way we found out was the RFP was released. And so then we're looking at it and I'm looking at it going, wow, I can't serve the Northeast Kingdom with half a budget and get the outcomes and do the employment work that we're doing. We have 2 approved IETs in the state, Step Up to Childcare, Step Up to Paraprofessional. We're currently in conversations and in collaboration with AHEC out of St. Johnsbury to create Step Up to Health Careers. We can't lift these things up in the Northeast Kingdom without funding for those 3 counties to lift it up. So in order for me to apply, I've got to apply for other counties in addition to mine. That's an irresponsible decision to expand an organization's simply to meet an end.
What does that mean? You have to apply for other counties. You've got 3.
So our organization historically serves those 3 counties. We've done it well. We are connected. We are networked. We have performance measures. We want to continue doing this really good work, and we have a lot of momentum. But if you look at the county the allocations by county based on the actual students, who could do that? Who can provide that service, right? Well, I know who could. Somebody who applies for 3 more regions that have one of the regions that's getting a lot of the money. Because that organization is just going to reallocate those funds to the 5 ones that lost money. So it just, in my mind, it just doesn't make any sense. And the funding formula must be revised, because what it is right now is not equitable, because it hasn't been looked at in 30 years.
So just to make sure I understand this, we heard the secretary say that it's competitive bid.
Mhm.
And how do you relate the term formula to a competitive bid? How do those two things? Just make sure I'm understanding what you're saying,
So,
because a formula is formulaic, a bid is not.
so it's a competitive process, application process. And the RFP tells you, you have the numbers right there. So if I am Burlington Tech College or Tech Center, and I want to apply for Chittenden County, I'm looking at and then saying, okay, well, Chittenden County has an allocation of 1.8 million or whatever. So I'm going to apply for that, right?
Okay.
And I'm gonna apply and I might get awarded that, right? Meanwhile, the counties around that, that have lost funding, and there are 9 counties in the state, the most rural counties that lost funding in this process. 4 counties benefited, 2 barely, like not much of a change. And then two did get significantly more. They should be getting more, but not to the level of that extreme. It went from extreme to extreme. It went from just doing based on students, right? Which everything else is weighted, right? The governor's, transformation talks about weighting some of these students, right? Like it costs more to serve a student who is in these certain situations, right? But that doesn't apply to adult ed.
So through the good fortune or good wisdom of the chair, we still have both parties in the room, and I'm not sure if it's appropriate or not, but can the AOE comment on the conversation? Just because here we are, we're kind of in a semi-vacuum of a new topic, and we need to understand.
Sure.
I would say, pardon me, I am Lisa Held, and I am the Assistant Division Director with the Agency of Education and Student Pathway. Lot to unpack there. First, regarding the funding formula and what was set. That was done through the state legislature. The AOE does not set the laws. That was through a public forum. It was debated. It was not a secret thing that the state legislature did, which you look in statute, which is clearly a formula. As to AOE being irresponsible, again, we do not have rulemaking authority. We are to follow the law that is there, and that is a committee recommendation. Second, regarding the funding, the state as a whole, when we look at the aggregate funding in total, very comparable to what the state has invested in aggregate over time. The state legislature decided that in making those funding decisions and putting the funding formula that we see in statute now, that AOE is following, is not reducing funds to this program statewide. Is it reducing funds with respect to Essex and Grand Isle? Certainly. But as with any business model or program, the way the competitive grant structure has always been, as we have new entities now interested in bidding on these areas or applying, that could be a model where someone comes to us in our applications and they could perhaps ask to do the whole state. They could put all of them in there and say, for this amount, my organization, Vermont State University, or whoever might be interested, we will educate these students. That could be a good model. It could be another provider who would say, an existing provider that says, you know, I can make this work. I'm going to apply for these 5 counties. And while we do have fewer students in a region, within my business model, within that proposal, we will serve those students in this way. So it is a difficult change. And it is true that we've had amazing, loyal providers for so many decades. But for the state, this is not an entitlement. It is a competitive grant. It has been such since 2014, when federal law within WIOA was passed, mandating that. The state of Vermont includes and blends federal and state. And so as far as education transformation, the amount of funds per student, we all know how hard all of you are working right now to make sense of what is a fair and good amount. This is the funding formula that you have given us to follow, and we are. It could be under your direction that this will be changed in the future to be equitable along with all the other decisions that you are making. But what you're hearing from the Agency of Education is we have respected what you did put in statute. It was not hidden. Why we could not answer their questions regarding right up to the competition is again the fact that it is competitive and we cannot give them a dollar figure and maybe a new applicant wouldn't be privy to that same amount. And that is the nature of something being competitive. So that would be, perhaps that answered some of the questions and all, but we are grateful for the great work that's being done. And we are confident that even with this change, we're going to still see great work. Our students in Essex and Grand Isle will still be served. And the state obviously thinks the rural communities are important and is a key investment. But this is a change.
A lot of questions right here. My mind, probably everybody's, but yes.
I think regarding questions, I think seems like there might be conflicting viewpoints or ideas. It would be great to have that St. James and to provide us perhaps to refresh our recollection just of what exactly we did a year ago and what some of these proposed changes are, and just to get it a bit more distilled down a bit so that we can.
If I understand it right, we're about to see the House bill. You've seen the form of reflection bill, which is a little bit different. Okay. So we should probably get the language in the House reflection. Which Dan. But and that what I was going to say is we're about to get a House, but we can do what you want. The time that should people walk through. That's not quite the way it's going to work. I just realized to say, started to say it because it's in the budget, not on a separate bill. Doesn't change. So I think we'll have to when you started get that. I think maybe that full stop you suggested.
I think that question was a little bit about legislative intent.
Yeah.
And I think Meg was wondering if she might
Industry.
speak a little bit about the legislative intent from last year, if that would be allowed.
Are you ready to switch places for a minute and have?
Sure.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. Meg Post, Wolfowitz Action Circles, and represent adult education and literacy. I think that's a wonderful idea to have Beth St. James in to walk through the language, both from the FY25 budget as well as the language that's in the FY26 budget. Sorry.
Both of these changes were in the budget last year and then this year.
Correct. Yeah, they were originally in the miscellaneous education bill, but that bill did not move. So in the conference committee, it was added to the budget.
Okay.
So I do want to just speak to the legislative intent of the language from FY25 because we worked really closely with some representatives on the language. And I'll just say a little bit, but I would actually recommend that if this committee wanted to really understand what the intention was of the General Assembly, they can have the legislators who worked on the language, which would be Representative Macaulay, Representative Conlon, Representative Shy, but Representative Mahali really worked on the language very closely and could speak to his intent.
Sure.
Both last
Okay.
year,
Last year.
the changes from last year. So I do want to be really, really clear that in the General Assembly, our intent was to increase total appropriations for adult education in the budget. Adult education and literacy providers have been chronically underfunded for many, many years. And it was absolutely the intent of everyone working on the issue to increase total appropriations in the state budget. It was never communicated that that would mean a difference in how that total bucket of funds, right? So AEL providers were chronically underfunded. I can't remember the exact numbers, but somewhere just below 5 million. And then by following this 26% 2-year average language that has existed in statute, but was never followed, we were able to increase the budget line item in the Agency of Education's budget to about 6.9 million. That was the change we were advocating for. That was the change we wanted. That was the legislative intent of the legislators who worked on the language, was to increase total appropriation. It was never communicated to providers that by following this 26% 2-year average for total appropriations in the budget line item, that would change the method of distribution to providers by county. And that was never communicated, and it was never understood, because both things have existed for many years now. The 26% 2-year average has existed in statute, and this weighted formula has existed under the state board. And the statute language was never followed for total appropriations. We advocated for that change, we got it. No one ever said that that would mean that the distribution formula with weights would go away. And so I just want to be really clear, when you talk about the legislative intent was to have more total dollars. So it's just not true that providers were informed about any change in the distribution to each county. And the language we secured, the intent was in fact not to replace the weighted formula. We didn't talk about the weighted formula because everyone was under the assumption that the weighted formula for distribution is still followed for distribution, even if we can get the total appropriations increased. And I think Beth St. James will be able to speak to that as well, because she sat through all the committee discussions.
Yes.
I'm so sorry if I missed this, but I guess from what I heard, I'm taking away that there might be some middle ground. It reminds me a lot of the discussion we're having about K through 12 education. That there are, I mean, I look at this and I have to have a provincial lens to some extent about Chittenden County, and Chittenden County looked clearly underfunded for doing probably most of the English language learning. That looks, in the overall scheme of when we were talking about increasing this funding, I think it makes sense that Chittenden County is getting more to serve probably not just a higher overall population, but beyond that, a very specific population that is very close to workforce ready, and is then taking advantage of English language learning. That's my sense. So I'd be open to something, but I don't know that I'm open to one or the other.
If I might, I do just want to say everything that is coming from the Adult Education and Literacy Network right now has been signed off by all 4 providers. Tara is here from Vermont Adult Learning.
I represent, we have to.
Yes, yeah.
And the providers work really closely together. And so I hear you. I think that's totally a valid response from you representing Chittenden County. And I will just say AEL providers have actually already come to consensus on their position, which is that we were excited about the changes made last year to increase appropriations. We saw success with that. And even the providers who are getting more under this RFP have agreed to the position of the network, which is that was a total surprise. It was not communicated to providers, and all 4 providers signed off on the letter of consent.
And does what's coming over to us in the House budget reflect your position?
Yes, from our position, what is in the House budget is language that is very important to preserve in the budget. And
So
Sounds like AEL maybe should be put into our plan. We're talking about it, but that's not doing. I mean, it's a, you know, it could almost be grouped in with a CTE from where I see it. I know there's this separate and distinct, but they got some of the same issues. So we just need to get cranking on the point.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
So it's probably because I missed this, but would you be advocating for the expected 25 numbers? Where are the numbers that you're advocating for?
For FY 26,
Uh-huh.
we would have to use the FY 25 because there is no weighted formula. The expectation is that with the other language that's in the budget for
Mhm.
FY 26 is that there will be a convening of a study group, and the secretary alluded to this, that it needs to be a robust group. It can't be just representation of the AOE and an AEL provider. There should also be on that, legislator, there should be the Department of Labor. Department of Labor is the ones that have their finger on the pulse of data, right? So like they know what are the different data points that could be collected, that are collected, that could be put into a funding formula that would create a more equitable. How can we take student numbers served and put that into part of the equation? Because I don't disagree that for the organizations that have seen an uptick in students, right, that is something, right?
Yeah.
I would also want to say that, the way a student gets into the number is they have to come into our services. They take all 3 of the assessments, the tested adult basic education and reading, writing, and math. And so they take those. They get set for where their skill level is and what their level of need is, and so then they're in that number, right? The ideal is that then we are providing services for them, and once they hit 12 hours of service, they then make the federal population number. And like what my colleague Catherine alluded to earlier was that you may have a student that comes in and takes the 3 tests of adult basic ed. They sit down with you, they do some motivational interviewing, they do some goal setting, and maybe they come back a couple of times, but then you don't hear from them again. You call them and you're texting them and you're trying to connect, but something's gone on in their life that's kind of pulled them away, right? But then they show up 6 months later because whatever crisis or whatever happened in their life, they're in a place ready to learn again. And so then they come back in, they've already been counted because they're still a number, but then they receive services.
But to answer your question very directly, in the budget, in the FY 26 budget, we have already, so this is why it's, again, the intent of the General Assembly piece. We did have to make this adjustment for FY 26. We are asking the Senate to support what the House did for adult education in the budget. We increased the line item again in the FY 26 budget because the budget submitted by the agency did not reflect the 26% 2-year average for the total appropriation. So we had to get that corrected in the House, and we did that. So the House budget now has the total appropriation calculated from the 26% 2-year average that is in statute. That number was not given in the administrative budget. So that was all the goal of last year. And so just to be clear, the FY 26 House budget collects the adult education literacy line item to be the 26% 2-year. So it's an increase of like 180 some thousand. And it includes language that we are asking you to support to prevent the consequences of this change that was not communicated.
Right.
I need to make sure I understand what I'm looking at here. And when I look at the total for each region,
So you will not see that in the budget, but, and.
no, I know, but I'm still, I think maybe I have become concerned once more about going back to something that might be less representative of where the population.
So one thing to know is actually that all of these numbers are incorrect in the OFP
Oh,
because we have already adjusted, well, I shouldn't say that yet. If the Senate supports what the House did on AEL in the FY 26 budget, then these numbers will be incorrect because this OFP is built from the FY 26 amount that was submitted in the governor's budget. And we have increased that amount.
So I'm,
That's not true. The RFP is correct.
It reflects the new amount in the FY 26
It
budget.
reflects the new
Oh,
amount.
okay, I did not know that.
so we're gonna have to continue this, and I think going back to Senator Hashim's would be been here both for history and then a look at the language in the, was she involved in the construction of the FY 20?
Yeah, so you'll want to look at the language in the FY 25 budget, which set up the study committee, and then the language in FY, it was all SHAs.
And I just, one last thing, I just want to be clear, not any one of us is objecting to the competitive application process. We're not saying that. We're saying pull it for a year. Get all this sorted out so that when the RFP does go out, that the allocations accurately reflect a modernized funding formula that meets all of the needs.
And the four districts are all on board for this, so I'm impressed by that. At least we're, as something to consider. And then we also have, there's also, I'm sitting here thinking about, we have some of these agencies that have been doing this work for a long time in their areas. And I think we have to be careful not to damage them with something that might, come in for a couple of years and then disappear. And I just have that in my mind. I'm also having in my mind that it's harder to do it in rural areas, and we have to make sure that we're balancing the fact that it's harder in rural areas with the fact of more people. And so I think that's what you're all trying to get to. And the fact that you're thinking about it together is helpful. Does the agency, did the agency have a position on the language in the FY 26 House budget?
Yes, and if you read our testimony, we delineate on that. I would just add that missing from this conversation are the new providers. Their voice isn't being heard at all. I think it's very good. There is continuity among the existing providers. But also, as if you read in a testimony, state statute has precedence over state board rules. And that is why, again, we're looking at.
The first time I heard about new providers, there are new providers.
We have new interests in applying. This will end on April 25th. And we will be able to then assess that, but potentially we could have, from a result of the competitive grant process, some new providers awarded with the counties. We don't know yet. And so I think that's an important thing to remember.
Okay. Well, more work to do here. So, any other questions today? Go ahead.
So the new provider should probably say almost the same thing you're saying, you believe? That the formula is not correct and that you can't, in a rural area, they cannot afford to do it for what the numbers that they're predicting.
So it's the point of the competitive process is to find the best possible providers for each county, right? It's not set up correctly because you would have to apply to the entire state. And in essence, so that you could reallocate the funds differently, which kind of defeats the whole purpose, right? Like, why do we allocate based on numbers in a piece if it's just going to be reallocated anyways? if I was, let's say I was a provider outside, right? And I can prove that I can do this work and do it well, right? And I'm looking at it and I applied for, a county, right? And the award is made to me, right? But then there's legislative language that happens that changes the formula, right? So then the grant I applied for, which said was going to be 1 point whatever, right? Now I'm being told that it's not that much. And there's language in the RFP that is a disclaimer on that. It says, these are estimates, right? These are
And
not.
wouldn't you have to go back to the bidding process then if it doesn't fall? That's what happens in construction. If everybody's bids are too high, it has to go back out to
Well,
to bid.
They're not bids, but they would, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, they would have to submit a revised budget from the one that they submitted with their application. And the budget you submit with your application, you're responding to in the 13 considerations. You're saying, with this amount of money, I can do these things. Well, if that amount changes, then that may possibly impact what you said you could do.
Right. Okay.
Okay, we're gonna have to revisit this. We have a witness who's been waiting since 2:30 for a whole other matter.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thanks everybody for that production.
We don't know my name.
Again, sorry for how long.
Who's the provider?
You guys actually just.
So they've been on the whole state?
People.
Right, I know, but
I know.
Oh, I know, I
It's like, listen, if there's some sort of recipe, let's do April 25th, that would be changed by this.
We just said,
Thank
you.
Thank you.
That's-
Yes, the language in the budget would make all this, I mean, it's not the timeline is not very.
Yeah, the timeline's really complicated.
But we will.
So people have put in application for something.
There will be none.
Yeah.
We're working
We're about-
we have our schools, but
We have enough to be quick.
anything else is.
This is just for a budget request.
Yeah. So
This is
something
the-
to take to.
On the free Vermont.
Yeah.
Is we have,
You would.
Oh my God, no, you're fine. I don't care.
I had things I was working on.
Not watching you from. It's okay. We're also on my.
It's fine, right? I'm checking county.
Director position, our
Yeah.
HR position.
But I
Things
mean,
like
maybe,
that.
and we should talk, but maybe I should be open to someone just reaching.
Yeah, so we.
How are you?
so we're on to, our final item today,
It's Chittenden County.
which is budget request. So we have to end that conversation over there. We have to end that conversation over there.
Senator
We
Hinsdale.
have to end that conversation. We're on to our next witness, our last witness of the day. And, you have a sheet of this?
I have not
Yeah.
yet.
good.
Been in this room.
Yes, I was in for 75% this year.
But not for,
That's
so, so we'll go around the room and introduce ourselves because it's your first time.
And I'm just gonna try to share my screen.
And turn off my audio.
Okay. Looks fit.
Looks behind the screen.
So I'm Keisha Ron Hinsdale, Chittenden Southeast.
Auto machine, Wyndham County.
Dave Weeks, Rutland County, and I just cannot sit anymore.
No worries. I know, listen.
So, Sean, let's move Bennington Center District.
Terry Williams, also from Rutland County.
Steve Heffernan in Addison County District.
Amazing. Well, my name is Autumn Moen. I am with Hunger Free Vermont. I'm our legislative policy lead. And thank you so much for the time. I know it's the end of your day, so I'm hoping to keep it easy, breezy, and clear to understand. And we'll see how that goes. Things looking clear to you? Yeah. Okay. So I'm here to cover our request for funding for the Child and Adult Care Food Program sponsor organizations. So our request is that $182,000 be appropriated to the Agency of Education in the Child Nutrition budget
in FY 26, and this would be distributed amongst the sponsor organizations of the Child and Adult Care Food Program, which I'm going to call the CACFP. Terrible acronym, it's kind of mouthy, but that's what I'm going to go with. And this small appropriation would mean that these providers are able to draw down more federal funding to provide meals and snacks to children in their care. So I'm going to give a brief overview of the program and how it works.
How sure are we that it's able to draw down more federal funding? What is our percentage of the surety?
The program, I guess so I can answer that question. Maybe I might answer it as I go.
Okay.
through, but are you speaking to potential cuts to federal programs?
Yes.
Because we are watching all of the nutrition programs really closely and we have heard absolutely nothing about any
Okay.
child nutrition program.
That would just be a distraction for me listening to the rest of it. If I
I'm
wasn't.
happy to answer that. Yeah.
I didn't want to get too excited. Without knowing what's going on.
Yep, I just checked with my colleagues who work really closely and monitor these child nutrition programs really closely, and there's no word of any of these specific programs being cut federally, but that's a really great question and important to clarify before. Okay. So what is the CACFP? It's a federal child nutrition program that early childhood education programs can participate in to receive cash reimbursements for eligible meals and snacks that are served to children in their care. And the Agency of Education administers the CACFP on the state level. And this program is really important because it's the most equitable way to ensure that all children in early childhood settings have access to developmentally appropriate nutrition. And without this program, families are often having to provide their own meals and snacks for their kiddos when they go to child care programs. So it leaves a lot of inequities in education. Some kids might get fruits and vegetables and whole grains, and other kids might get processed sugary snacks like Pop-Tarts, because low-income families are often forced to make tough decisions when food prices are really high like they are right now. And the CACFP, like I said, is the most equitable way to make sure that all these kiddos are accessing the nutrition that they need. So how does funding work? As you probably noticed before, the request for $182,000 is to the sponsoring organizations of the CACFP. And under this program, the sponsoring orgs act as a fiscal intermediary for funds between the state agency and the sponsored family child care programs. So sponsoring organizations have a lot of responsibilities. They provide support to the meal program personnel. They monitor the meal program operations. They have to conduct meal program reviews, which is required by the federal program regulations. And then they act as this fiscal intermediary.
Who are the sponsoring organizations?
Getting into it right here. That's perfect timing. Yep. So the sponsoring organizations, as you can see up here, there are 3 of them across the state: Brock Community Action, Capstone Community Action, and the Winston Prouty Center for Child Development. So no worries. I know. We all so
We have snacks.
yeah, this would be a good time to be handing out snacks. So as of April of 2025, so this is up to date information, there are only 3 remaining sponsors that are covering the entire state. There used to be a lot more. And under the program guidelines, these family child care homes can only participate in the CACFP under an agreement with one of these sponsoring organizations because they act as this fiscal intermediary. And at this time, all of these sponsor organizations have shared with us that the administrative money that they get federally is not nearly adequate to cover the cost of being a sponsor organization. And I'll just note that in 2024, we lost another sponsor organization because, like they said, the federal funding just didn't cover their responsibilities. And so on top of this administrative funding challenges, the 3 that are left now have to physically cover a much wider area geographically, which just makes their capacity challenge even more difficult.
So what is, there's a technical definition. What is a family child care home?
Yeah, the definition for this, I can follow up and give you the exact definition because I don't want to screw it up, but there is a difference between the family child care homes and family child care centers. And I know it has to do with the amount of children in the care and where it is. So these are care centers that are often in people's homes. They might be watching 5 to 10 children. So kind of like small daycare homes would be another way of putting that, but they have specific
And
definitions.
could also be a more traditional childcare center.
I believe so, yes. And I can follow up with the definitions of like how they kind of fall under two different ones.
Are you, thanks, sir. Are you targeting a particular age bracket here?
So this is all kids that would be in this like daycare age. So not preschool or K through 12, but in daycare. So I'm thinking
0 to
0.02. I should follow up with the exact definition. Yeah, plus 3 or 4, you know, before they go to preschool. Yeah,
Actually, especially.
up to 6. Okay. So up to age 6 is what I've heard over here. But yeah, I'd be happy to follow up with all the like specific definitions of the childcare homes and whatnot. So the current gaps in funding have direct impacts on children's access to nutrition in these childcare spaces. As of January 2024, only about half of these family childcare homes in Vermont were actually participating in the CACFP. And without these sponsor organizations, family childcare homes are unable to participate in the program at all. And with this small state investment of $182,000, these sponsor orgs would have an increased capacity to be able to onboard more family childcare homes. They're kind of maxed out right now. Even if more people wanted to participate, they're really stretched thin.
So just so we know, when you say increased capacity, what does that mean?
I'm talking about, yeah, that's a good question.
I know what increased capacity means, but what does that translate to?
Yeah, so I'm talking about increased administrative capacity and the staff time that it takes to
But
do
how much
these
more,
work
how much
up here.
more will it, how do you quantify that?
In
Not in
dollars.
dollars, but in terms of impact.
I'm not sure I'm following what exactly would be helpful. I want to make sure I answer
I'm
your
thinking
question in a
about
helpful
reporting
way.
this on a Senate floor, for instance, which we were, not that we will because it's in the budget.
Yeah.
But in some, how would we explain what that increased capacity means? Would it
Yeah.
mean a little bit more capacity, ability to double the program?
Yeah, so the way that we got to this number was that we did interviews with and focus groups with these family childcare home providers as well as with the 3 sponsor organizations, and they identified their funding gap and said, if we got this much money, then we could meet the need. And I have some stories at the end too of exactly what they've said about this. But this number was put together. It would be split in 3 between these 3 organizations, these 3. Yeah, so the number was derived from them telling us exactly what they needed. Yeah. So it would meet their capacity to then hopefully to administer the program and be able to drive around and do all the monitoring and the reviews that they have to do. Yeah.
Is that $182,000 going to cover all the existing childcare centers?
So, yeah, so when we did the interviews with them, they gave us these numbers that would cover the work that they do now and allow them to take on a bit more capacity as well. They want to bring more family childcare homes into the program, but right now they're kind of maxed out. So they gave us these numbers with the idea that they would be able to cover everyone who's in it right now and hopefully take applications to even take on more childcare homes to be able to participate.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
Have they stopped accepting, are their applications sitting, waiting for review?
That's a good question. And I think I could ask these folks like kind of what that process is at. I know there sometimes people will join in and then join out. The number that I had with the 203 was as of January of last year. We haven't gotten an updated report on how many programs. We know it to be a pretty similar amount. So I'm not sure if there's exactly like a log, but they just kind of speak anecdotally that they can't take on anymore. But some of them have even in the last year taken on more, even though they're completely stretched. Yeah, but that's a good question. I can follow up with it and let you know.
So we have a variety of programs that provide supplemental income to families, low income families. Whole food stamp program now, whatever. Snack.
3 squares in Vermont. Yeah.
So isn't a low income family already financial support for their kids, regardless of whether they're in one of these facilities or not?
Yeah, that's a good question. So of course, yeah, the low income families who would qualify for 3 squares benefits would be getting these grocery benefits as well as hopefully being able to go to a child care center where they know that their kiddo can count on a meal and a snack, kind of similarly to their school age kids being able to count on universal school meals. And it really just makes their 3 squares Vermont benefits go even further. Yeah, and stretch and go even further because we know that a lot of folks are receiving, even at the max, $200, $230 in that range a month. And that's, as we know, grocery prices, that's not going to cover their budget for the month. And so it really helps them maximize the federal, the 3 squares Vermont budget that they get. So I think they kind of work in tandem together.
It's the 182 on top of base funding, or is that new money, or is that?
This would be new money. So the state does not put any administrative money into this program at all. And the federal money that they're given is just very inadequate. So this would be a new funding for a new piece of funding for specifically the sponsor organizations to, like we talked about, increase their.
Go ahead.
Okay, let's see where I was. We're about here. So some of you are probably familiar with this idea of this virtuous cycle. So we really applied it here too, that if these sponsor organizations were able to get some state funding, this would really increase their capacity like we talked about and be able to onboard more family childcare homes. And with more childcare homes in the state participating, we bring in even more federal dollars and allow another sponsor organization to onboard and be able to do this work and so on and so forth. So I just wanted to center it in that. And I'm going to end with just putting this up on the board just so you can see it there. And then I wanted to share a few things from the sponsor organizations that they shared with us and that they've shared in testimony as well. So Pat from Capstone Community Action, she talked about how when she started at this job at Capstone, there were 7 sponsor organizations and now there's only 3. And when the 4th one opted out in 2024, they left Capstone to cover both Grand Isle and Franklin counties on top of the work they're already doing. And she said, when asked if I would take the new area, my first thought was, why would I consider doing that? Because we can't afford the financial burden. But what changed my mind was realizing that there was no one else to do this, and this program is just too important. And last week we were telling her about our ask and how we were going to be asking you for this. And she said, I'm not sure what will happen without the help of more funding. So they're really worried that they're not going to be able to continue doing this.
Who were you calling?
This was Pat from Capstone Community Action. Yeah. And I can share a similar thing from Amy from Brock Community Action in Rutland. And she shared that with food security at an all-time high, the meals and snacks
Food
provided.
insecurity.
Sorry, food insecurity.
Okay, I was late.
Yeah, that's it's fine. No, that's a good clarification. Food insecurity at an all-time high. The meals and snacks provided by the CATFP are more important than ever. It kind of speaks to what you said, like it really works together with other supports that low-income families receive. And she says the impact of losing this program cannot be outstated. So I just wanted to share their words too, because they're the ones working every day that do this work. So I hope that painted a somewhat clear picture of the ask here.
Patrick, did you have a question?
I did. So I'm going to go back to same similar questions as a moment ago. So you said that there's no one else to do this, that the parents already being paid for SNAP or some other program. You correct.
Sure.
Three
Squares, yes.
Yeah.
3 squares. Again, how do you react to a comment that this might be like a duplication of effort?
Yeah, I would say
Parents
that,
involved.
yeah, I think that's a good question. It's good to think about things like that. I think that when I think about my grocery budget, and I'm a household person of 1, I don't have kids, I don't have anybody else I have to provide for. I definitely spend more than $200 a month on groceries, and I'm not providing for other people. So when I think of if we can provide, so like I said earlier, like some kids do end up bringing processed food and like Pop-Tarts and things for their lunch, because that's when you're operating on a budget of a couple hundred a month for snacks or for food for a family of, maybe you're raising a couple young kids. That's a pretty high grocery budget. So I think this really ensures that when kids go to their daycare program, they're able to get, fruits and vegetables, and they're able to get, access to whole foods that can really foster their development, and they don't put their family in the position of deciding between different, food choices that they have to make at home.
What if they decrease SNAP and increase this? I mean,
So
it's already
who's they?
the state.
The state.
Well,
I'm not really sure. I'm just, so I listen to my constituents all the time, and they're like, hey, when are we ever going to find balance in what we provided? Here's I don't know, to me, first blush, it's only first blush, is that we already have a program. We're already taking care of kids. May not be as generous as it should be. At the same time, now we're asking for a second program to supplement that.
I would say it's really important to remember too that the funding for 3 Squares Vermont, all those benefits, so the few $100s that I mentioned that families get to live off of for an entire month, it equates to about $6 a day. And that is all federal funding. So the state doesn't actually provide any money in benefits to families through Three Squares Vermont. So this would be kind of another route to be able to support the capacity of these sponsor organizations. And
Still our tax dollars.
Okay, well, SNAP,
Go.
can I just say SNAP stands for Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. So it already is supplemental in trying to help people stretch their budget. So these are all supplemental food programs. That's the nature of them. They're trying to supplement people's very low income to feed them.
So what I want to get my arms around is the money for this, for the child nutrition dollar budget, you're trying to draw it down with the 182 is to help you draw it down.
Right.
draw down more
Federal
federal
money.
funding. Yeah, so the money.
To go to the 50% of kids in homes that are not able to take advantage of this at this point.
So it would be to, I think I'm understanding, I'm just gonna repeat back to you. Yeah, so this money would be to go to the sponsor organizations who, like you said, oversee right now 50% of family and child care homes, because that's about the capacity that they can manage. With this funding, they might be able to take on more family child care homes, which would be really great. And that would help them draw down the federal funds so that they can be, because all the cash reimbursements to the programs for the food itself is all federal money. So there's no state money that goes into that. This is to help build capacity and to strengthen this program. And so we can expand it more and make sure more kids are able to access food in their childcare programs.
Play devil's advocate. We had this conversation at length for universal school meals.
Yeah.
Okay. So in this age bracket, I don't think stigma is an issue. That if one kid is essentially receiving supplemental food funding and one is not,
Yeah.
why, it sounds like, if I understood this correctly, that this is all the kids.
Mhm.
So the kids who come from families that have the means to pay, why then are we paying? Why then
Yeah.
dedicate treasury to that?
Mhm. It's definitely, so yeah, I hear you. And the way that this program works is it does feed every kiddo that's in a childcare program. And these childcare homes are often pretty small. So just economically, it's more efficient to just pay for the food for all the kids than to do all the paperwork to screen everyone and do all that. And similarly to universal school meals, it's actually more efficient to just make sure every kiddo gets the same thing and that they can all be set up to succeed in school. And I think that's kind of the aim of the program, to really even the playing field so that kids can have access to learning just like everyone else. Yeah.
Senator Weeks and I went to an early education daycare center and actually had that conversation. She goes, yeah, if we actually charged, probably cost more to do the paperwork than it is for what we're getting funding, which I thought was interesting.
Mhm.
That it was a different way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Well, and I worked in Burlington Children's Space. We had a similar, it wasn't a home, so I don't know the center version of this.
Mhm.
And it paid for a wonderful woman who came in before lunch and made all the kids food. That's what you're helping to pay for, not just like a packaged meal. And what if the kid, they're 3. What if the kid who comes with the lunch wants the quesadilla that was just freshly made rather than like a cold sandwich in their lunch bin?
For you.
I ate the food, it helped me when I was making $8 something an hour, to take care of kids, to also eat the quesadillas with the kids. So it creates like a community meal made by someone local with really good ingredients that is cheaper than every kid having to bring their own little sandwich at 3 years old.
Okay, and also, I'll Senator Weeks asked one question about like SNAP and how it relates, and the other way that I'm sitting here thinking about it is that SNAP might provide about 1/5 of the money a family needs. So having this on top might bring it up to something above 1/5.
Yeah.
Or whatever, but it's not like it's 130% or anything. It's small, so I don't know. I mean, that's what I'm. You said push back, so I'll push back a little bit. Just put that all in the mix. Okay, so your request to us, and can you just for we already have it, right? Okay, we have to. Okay, then we have to soon next week. I think it's time to go through our budget letter. But this has been so this 182 theoretically can help us draw down a lot of thousands of dollars of federal money.
And I can get you more specific numbers. I can follow up after of like what they're drawing down now and provide that to you after. Because I don't want to ballpark
It's
it and get it
almost like,
wrong.
it's almost like potentially double because 50% now, right? Because we're only getting 50%.
Yeah, if all the programs are in it, then yeah, if all the family child care homes participated, that's more title money for sure.
Is it in the House budget? Did you say that?
It is not in the House budget, but it was in the House education budget memo and they were really excited about it. And then unfortunately did not make it across the finish line in the House budget. There was some misunderstandings, I think, on how the program worked, but
Okay.
but I know there was a lot of excitement, especially in the House education community. We spoke with some a lot.
Okay.
Okay. Did you end up getting a chance to be in front of the House budget committee?
My colleague, I believe, Keely Agan, she's one of our early childhood nutrition managers. She spoke with them and I think House appropriations as well. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
More questions? Awesome.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much. And that's the end of the day.